I'm David Johnson, the Timeform flat editor, and here to have an in-depth look at the Prix de Triomphe on Sunday. We're going to start out by looking at how we think the race is going to be run. We'll look through each horse individually, and then we'll try and come up with a 1, 2, 3 in how we think the race is going to pan out. So it's the smallest field for the Arc since 2007, and there's a distinct lack of genuine pacemakers. You can see, normally O'Brien tends to have quite a lot in there. There's nothing of that this time, so I don't think we're going to get a breakneck pace, but you look at the horses and the way that the natural stylers that are in there, I think we're going to get an even pace. There's a Japanese horse in there called Kiseki. He's run some of his best races from the front, and I think he's got a single figure stall. I'd imagine he is the one that's going to go forward. We've got Gayath in there as well. He's always prominent in his races. I don't think he necessarily has to lead. He didn't get to the front last time until 3 furlongs or so. So given he's drawn in stall 12, I'd imagine he'll end up taking a lead. We've got other horses in there that tend to sit prominent. Enable, you'd imagine she will be there and thereabouts. Japan, he's not going to be ridden for a turn of foot, I wouldn't have thought. Magical, she'll be there. And then, you look at the others, they're probably going to be more midfield to out the back. And then the likes of Soft Light, Nagano Gold, they're the ones that are going to be right out the back. So I think we're going to get an even run race. Hopefully we'll get a clean race, and the best horse will come to the fore. So we start now by looking through each horse individually in race card order. And French King, he's the one that we start with, and he's been much improved this year. He's won all 4 of his starts, including a German Group 1 last time. He beat Mark Johnston's Communique that day by just a length, Old Persian in third. So, as UK punters, we know a fair bit about those horses, and what we do know is that there's a fair bit more going to be needed to win an Arc de Triomphe than the form that French King has currently shown. Then we move on to Voldgeest. He's a high-class performer on his day with Andre Fabre. Got plenty of good efforts at Group 1 level. He's twice a winner in Group 1 company, it has to be said. He's 4th in last year's Arc and 3rd in the King George. He showed his well-being when winning the Prix on trials day last time. No reason that he won't run his race, and he's got each-way prospects for all. You wouldn't be surprised if he found 1 or 2 too good. Then we move on to Gayath of Charlie Appleby's. He's a lightly raced 4-year-old, and he shot into contention for the Arc when he was a 14-length winner of a Group 1 in Germany last time. Now, a 14-length win isn't necessarily the easiest to assess, it has to be said, but we've rated that as a top-class performance for now, and one that suggests he's well worth his place in the lineup. Whether he can produce that kind of performance in a race as competitive as the Arc, that is the big question, and stall 12 probably wouldn't be the one that William Buick would have chosen, but he very much deserves to take his chance in this contest. And we move on to Kiseki. He's the first of the Japanese horses. He's on a bit of a losing run. He hasn't won since the Japanese St. Leger 2 years ago. He's got plenty of good efforts since then. He was runner-up in last year's July Cup. He probably needed the run in the Prix, but you look at his best form, and even with that, if he can run to that level, he does look up against it. There's another Japanese horse next called Blast One Piece. He won their big race, the Arima Kinnan, last December. He's coming back from a mid-season break when he won a Group 2 last time. That was over 1.25 miles, should be fine over 1.5 miles. I think he's going to do the best of the Japanese, but I'd still expect 1 or 2, maybe even more than that, to be too good. I don't think he's quite the level of the likes of Deep Impact and Orfèvre that have been placed in this race in the past. The final Japanese runner is Fairmont. He was a Japanese St. Leger winner last year, and he ran to an even higher level when winning their Tenno Show over 2 mile in this spring. He probably needed the run over 1.25 miles behind Blast One Piece last time. That trip wouldn't have played to his strengths either, and that, I think, is the doubt for him even over this 1.5 miles. Like I say, his best form has come over 2 miles, and I think he's going to need the pace to collapse to be getting involved, and I'd be surprised if that happened. It's a real international field, it has to be said. We've also got Nagano Gold in there. He's trained in the Czech Republic. You might remember him from Royal Ascot, where he was placed in the Hardwick. He was second there, running on strongly from a poor position. The problem is that run is a standout for him. He was below form at Deauville last time, and it's going to be a huge surprise if he's good enough. Then we're on to Enable, who doesn't need too much to be said about her, obviously. She's one of the top fillies of all time. She's won her last 12 starts, 10 of those at Group 1 level, and she comes here bidding to win this race for a historic third time. You look at her form this year, and even though it's not quite at the level she was at as a 3-year-old, that King George win still marks her out as the one to beat. You know, she's got the beating of the likes of Magical, Crystal Ocean. Obviously, he's retired now. He would have, you know, had each way claims in this race himself. The big question with regards to Enable is her price and whether we think she's a value bet. The problem with Enable is you look at that price, she's a shade of odds on, and I just think she's probably got a little bit more on her plate than what those odds suggest. Her last 4 wins in Open Group 1 company have all been by less than a length, and while she keeps getting the job done and you can't knock her for that, I just like her, given that she's only got the £2 in hand on Timeform ratings. I can't sit here and say that she's a value bet at a shade of odds on. We're on to Magical, who is very much usually the bridesmaid against Enable, but she is a 3-time Group 1 winner in her own right, it must be said. She spent most of her season at 1.25 miles, but I think it's possible she might be slightly better at this trip. She showed improved form in last year's Arc, and then she was even better again at the Breeders' Cup, where she and Enable pulled well clear. She was coming off a break when beaten for a 4th time by Enable in the Yorkshire Oaks, so I think she'll step up on that. And she did all she needed to do in the Irish Champion in what wasn't a strong race last time. She'll win a race. I think she's 3rd in on the Timeform ratings, and at double figures she makes solid each way appeal. Japan, obviously Magical's stablemate. He's developed into one of the best 3-year-olds this season, beaten in the Dante and the Derby on the back of interrupted preparations, but he's very much gone the right way since. He's won all 3 starts since those 2, including a couple of Group 1s, one over this course and distance, and then the Juddmonte International last time. It needs pointing out that it was a below par Crystal Ocean that he beat there, but against that, it's a positive that he could do that over 1.25 miles. He has to be better, I think, over 1.5 miles, and I think you can see why Ryan Moore chooses him over Magical. He does have a bit more potential than that filly. Soft Light is one of the French horses. He's been supplemented, but it must be said he looks something of a vanity runner for his owner. He doesn't look good enough, and I think it's fair to say he's more likely to finish last than first. Then we've got the last one in there, Sotsas, the French-trained 3-year-old colt who won the French Derby. Now, you go back a few years, and Sotsas is a kind of horse with a profile that dominated the Arc, the top French-trained 3-year-old colt. But it's, I think, Rail Link in 2005 was the last one of those with that profile to win the race. So he's probably not quite the wise guy selection that he looks. His form leaves him with a bit to find. I mean, don't get me wrong, he did really well to win the Prix on the back of a break last time. He met all sorts of trouble despite that only being a 4-runner race. And he is open to improvement, but at single figures, I do think he's probably up against it. So that's each individual horse. So what do we think is going to happen then? It's a potentially historical running, and I think pretty much everybody is hoping that Enable can go where Trev couldn't and win that historic 3rd Arc de Triomphe. But we have to put all that to one side when looking for a bet. Looking at her odds, I think you have to take her on. Her price does give the race an appeal in each way prospect, and the obvious each way horse for me is Magical. You know, her form's good enough to see her placed in I think the last 3 Arcs. A reproduction of what she's done several times will see her fill the frame. So she's one bet, the each way angle, but I'm also going to side with Gaiath as well. He is the could be anything horse. Like I say, he's got that Timeform rating from Germany of 130. That gives him just £2 to find with Enable. It might be even that we look back after the arc and say that 130 even underestimated him. He's the one that's got the star potential, and for me at double figures, I will back him.